What happened?
I'm not sure anyone can answer that right now. I know to me, it was weird because I mean the offense was awful again in the first half, but then in the second half they kind of got into a rhythm. I thought Drew Aller, it's going to get overlooked and understandably so, but I thought Drew Aller played by far his best game of the season. It reminded me a lot of the USC game last year, where in the second half he was trying to almost single-handedly will them to victory the way he did in the Coliseum. And came up just short. I think what's most concerning is defensively, it looked like a group that quit. And that is always a concern. Just Amari Campbell, the transfer linebacker from North Carolina, made some mistakes, missed some tackles, but played his heart out. Dom DeLuca, the former walk-on, had the big game against SMU last year in a playoff. Similarly, played his heart out, but DeLuca, he's a former walk-on for a reason. Limited athletically, was only in there because Tony Rojas is out for the rest of the year with a knee injury. But outside of those two, that was a defense that there was just not a lot of effort. And you have a bunch like Penn State where they brought everybody back with one intention to make a run in the national championship. Technically, that's not over yet because if you went out and you're 10-2 with a win in Columbus and a win against Indiana, you're still going to be in the playoff, but that's not going to happen. That third loss is when, not if. And when that third loss happens, that's when I fear. Things could really get ugly because I think you could really see this team start to check out, see guys start to opt out. And it's going to raise some pretty big questions on the big picture state of this program. And it's unbelievable that we're here, right? I mean, like you said, going into the season, it was Penn State, it was Texas, it was Clemson, and even Penn State after the Oregon loss, right? It was still hey, they can't get over the hump in the big game, but I thought they showed some good things to really fight back in that game just to tie it, and then to have the lead in overtime. And that bad snap, if it bounces towards the line instead of right to Dante Moore, well, who knows what this conversation looks like, because they would have recovered it, they would have won that game, and things look totally different. But to come out against UCLA, who I still think is the worst Power 4 team in the country, and just lay the egg of all eggs. I mean, I said it on the Whiteout Report post game show on Saturday evening. I think you can argue that was the single worst loss in program history. I think it's by far the worst loss of the James Franklin era, and it's one that you're just left wondering, like, where is this going to go? How ugly could it get? How much does it spiral? And what's the fallout, assuming all of that happens?
Marty, I follow UCLA pretty closely. So, this is a game that I had on my main TV, and I was following it from start to finish. Where do we start with the coaching? What's worse, either for you or for the Penn State fan base? The fact that Jim Knowles, a $3.1 million defensive coordinator, gets schooled by a 33-year-old making his debut as a play caller, Jerry Neuheisel, or that James Franklin was just asleep at the switch early and late. Early on the onside kick, obviously UCLA's interim patchwork quilt staff found something on film in that onside kick formation, and then at the end, not rushing the punter on the safety, allowing UCLA to burn 8 seconds. So what's the worst of those SHIT sandwich things from the Penn State coaching staff, Knowles and Franklin alike?
I mean, I think a lot of you got to put at the feet of James Franklin. First and foremost, you're the head coach, right? It falls at your feet. The onside kick was terrible. The clock management at the end of the first half, where they never called a timeout. And he said afterward they didn't do it because they didn't want to leave enough time for UCLA to go down and score. Well, UCLA still wound up going down and scoring anyway again before halftime. And then even the play selection, the punt. I mean, every human being on the planet, apparently, except for James Franklin and special teams coordinator Justin Lustig, knew what UCLA was going to do there. And even if you think they're just going to punt it, you still rush that punt because you probably have, especially in a game where you've already blocked one, you honest to God probably have a better chance of blocking a punt and scoring off it than you do of going the length of the field in 15 seconds or whatever it was. So I thought it was more at him. I mean, with Jim Knowles, obviously it was an awful game for the defense, but See, the thing is, I can find some not excuses or anything of that nature, but like you said, it was a first time new Heisel called an offense, so you really couldn't prepare for it, which I think comes. You've got to put some grain of salt there. For all of his shortcomings off the field, Nico is still a very talented quarterback. So, but and ultimately, I said this on our show Saturday as well with Jim Knowles. If your defense looks like they don't care, there's only so much you can do as a coach, right? If your players just put in an effort like that, you can't coach effort, unfortunately. So I think it's going to fall to the feet of James Franklin. It really got overshadowed coaching wise, but I think Andy Kotelnicki had a god awful game as well. The 4th and 2 with a minute and a half left or whatever it was, when it looked like, hey, they're going to go in here, they're going to score, and they're somehow going to get out of here with a win still. I wish I was making this up. I'm not. We're sitting on the couch. Trevor Pena goes in motion. My 8-year-old in his first year of tackle football says they're going to fake the jet motion. Aller's going to keep it. They faked the jet motion. Aller kept it and they stuffed it. When the 8-year-old in his first year of tackle football is diagnosing your play pre-snap, players and coaches at a college level are certainly going to diagnose it pre-snap. So yeah, it was just coaching malpractice on so many fronts. I honestly was a little bit surprised that on Sunday we didn't see a coach or two fall on a sword for that. Rather Ben Lustig, the special teams coordinator, Marquise Hagan's the much maligned wide receivers coach, even Daniel Bryan, the quarterbacks coach at this point. I really was surprised that I don't necessarily think Franklin wanted to make a move. I was surprised from people above him didn't force a move to be made of some sort. But yeah, it was just coaching malpractice on so many fronts. And again, to go back to the defense and Jim Knowles, like I said, if your defense, if any unit appears to be putting forth no effort and not caring, there's only so much you can do as a coach, as a play caller. And to me, that circles back to the head coach for not having them properly prepared for this game. I understand the Oregon loss was a gut punch. I understand you had to deal with the narratives all week that you can't get over the hump. You had to fly across the country, bring your own juice kind of game. I get all of that. But if you're that concerned about that narrative that you can't get over the hump, you tell your guys, hey, we're going to have Ohio State in a couple weeks. We're going to have Indiana. We're going to have the playoff. We're going to have chances to finally buck that trend. Well, part of having that chance was making sure you beat UCLA first. So to me, it all falls at the feet of the head coach.
And Marty, football being the sport that it is in regards to the length of time and the opportunities involved. And I know that the games are shorter than they used to be. There's probably 8 to 15 plays less on each side of the sideline, but it's not like basketball where there's a hot shooter, there's a couple turnovers in an NCAA basketball game, and before you blink, it's like a 35-minute first half, and you get to the second half and the underdog's got a shot and people are white knuckling it. Football is a long game. Usually there's you can get down by 2 or 3 touchdowns, and when you're the superior team, you kind of like reset and say, okay, we didn't show up, but we can pull it off now. And we were just all waiting for that switch to flip because, I was scratching my head, and I'm sure Matt and I will have a session going through some of the great upsets in modern college football history, because this is one for the ages, because I almost separated from like an App State and a Michigan, because that Michigan team didn't turn out to be a great Michigan team. This is supposed to be a great Penn State team that obviously showed up to play for all the marbles. And I know I'm asking you questions that you can't answer. We're both Matt and I are hitting you with things that you can only guess and take an angle on, but it's dumbfounding what happened out there, especially considering, again, this wasn't that they did this against Rutgers. They did this against Maryland. They did this against somebody that at least is a competent football team, like a bad team, but a competent football team. Like UCLA was just completely inept going into this game, as you well know. It's just shocking that these two teams could produce this result, because with all the criticisms, and I'll shut up here in a second and let you speak, with all the criticisms of Penn State football leading into this game, I remember at one point I was counting the games that they had won consecutively in the Big Ten, not named Ohio State and Michigan. It was a million in a row. It was like 45 or 50 in a row at one point. These are the games that they win. And then to fall off the cliff in this one is just, yeah, it just took everyone by complete surprise.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack, but it starts with, like you said, that all the criticism of James Franklin, he never throw the first 2 years of his tenure out because they were still dealing with sanctions. You throw out 2013 and 2014, or 2014, 2015, excuse me. Very rarely do they lose these games, right? You mentioned the Big Ten streak until the Big Ten championship game last year, and again that was against an Oregon team that was undefeated and really good, and they still almost pulled it out. They had not lost a Big Ten game against a team other than Michigan or Ohio State since 2021. And if you throw out that, I hate saying it but the 2021 season, they got a ton of injuries, things went sideways. Outside of that, in the COVID year, they hadn't lost the Big Ten game against anyone other than one of those two since 2019. Like, it's just, they take care of business in these games. And, you mentioned where it ranks in terms of like biggest upsets of the modern era. You just look at the numbers on it. It had been since 1985, a team that was 0-4 or worse beat a top 10 team. They were what? I think like a 28.5 point favorite. The 28.5 point favorites don't lose. They just don't. So you look at it from those facets, and that's where, to me, like I said earlier, this goes down as one of the worst losses in program history. And part of why I say that is, again, there's a lot of concern about where this is going to go, not just for this season, potentially program as a whole. I heard somebody today make a comparison to the 1999 game against Minnesota, where Penn State was 8-0, ranked number 1 in the country. Very similar to this team. They brought everybody back. Hey, this is the year they're going to win a national championship. They just get absolutely stunned at home by, and that was a Minnesota team that, at least went to a bowl game. So it was even much different than this. And then they lose the last 3 games of that season. And then for the next 5 years, they finished below 500. And Joe Paterno probably came the closest he ever got to getting fired. So yeah, it's up there. And not just in Penn State history, but in modern college football history in terms of the upset. It's hard to wrap your mind around. And again, I don't know where this goes now, because I came out of that game with the thought, I really, really do wonder if James Franklin's the coach in 2026. Honestly, at this point, I'd almost be surprised, unless they right the ship and they win out, get to the playoff, make a run. I'd almost honestly take the field over him as the coach, because I think you're going to see a scenario where a lot of the big donors, the people ponied up to bring back Katron Allen and Nick Singleton and Drew Aller and Dennis Sutton and all, I can understand their train of thought. Hey, we went all in and you won 8-4, 7-5, whatever this winds up, even if it's just 9-3 and missed the playoff. Why would they continue to donate until a change is made, right? And in college football, when you lose the boosters, when you lose the donors, it doesn't matter what anyone else feels, right? Because that's what matters. And in addition to that, I can tell you right now, I have never seen the fan base as a whole just turn on him like this. It probably hasn't been this toxic since early in 2016 when they were 2-2, and then they had that overtime win against Minnesota, and then they didn't lose again to the Rose Bowl against USC that year, and they went on that magical run, and it sparked this tremendous 10-year run they've been on. And even now, I think it's so much worse than that, because I think back then, when people were frustrated, they were still coming out of the sanctions. They were a very young team. It was only his 3rd year. There were a lot of things still working in his favor. At this point, there's nothing there, right? This is year 10. You've proven time and time again in the big games. James Franklin spent so many years preaching needing that university alignment from the president on down, and he's now very open about the fact they have that alignment. So at this point, I mean, they shelled out the money to keep people. They went and got Jim Knowles. There's no excuses at this point for this season to result in anything less than at least a playoff berth and probably a win or two in the playoff. And it looks like they're not going to be anywhere close to that. So that's where I put this loss at being where, it's not just a bad loss because you were a top 10 team, preseason national championship favorite, and you went on the road and lost a 28-point favorite against an 0-4 team that I honestly thought was going to go 0-12. It's what the long-term ramifications could be here, and some of this, you don't know how much of this is just coming out because of what's happened, but there's been a lot of smoke in recent days of, from parents of players that I guess the locker room, supposedly they're very tight. There's a lot of tension. People are unhappy. And just when those things start to happen and you start to lose people, that's when, as a coach, especially at the collegiate level, you're in trouble. This isn't the NFL where it's like, hey, you're a good coach. Things went sideways this season. Let's get to the off season. We can trade guys. We can do free agent. We can flush this out and start over. That's not how it works in college football. Even in modern college football at the portal, it's still not that way. So I really do wonder about the long-term outlook of this program moving forward if they don't right the ship. And it's like, man, I mean, you play Northwestern this week and you'd like to think you should win that easily, but you should beat UCLA easily. And I also think Beaver Stadium on Saturday, it's going to be interesting because it's homecoming. And I don't know what the crowd's going to look like. I'm sure it's not going to be as big as it would have been before this game. And it's going to be a hostile crowd and not for Northwestern. It's going to be strange. And then after that, like you go to Kinnick at night, which is never easy to begin with. Then you have Ohio State and Indiana in back-to-back weeks. I mean, I'm not super high in Nebraska because I don't love their line of scrimmage play, but they're improved this year. Like this could be – there's, like I said, I think there's a scenario where – especially once you pick up that third loss and you officially are not going to make the playoff, this thing could really snowball and really turn ugly for the not just for the season, but for the program as a whole. And I'm just absolutely flabbergasted that this is where we're at. Coming into the season, I thought at worst they'd go 10-2, get in the playoff and be positioned to make a run. But yeah, we'll see. And Justin, the buyout, it's $56 million. However, there's been a lot of research done on this by multiple people, myself included, since the end of the game. They don't owe it in a lump sum. It's over the length of the contract, so they would have until December 31st, 2031 to pay it out. Quick math on it, it'd be about $750,000 a month. That's a number that an athletic program like Penn State, if they really want to find a way to pay that, they'd find a way. So I don't think the buyout is the detriment people think it is. Now, again, if he's not here next year, I also think there's a chance there's like a mutual parting the ways type of deal. It's been long reported his not reported officially, but rumored his wife doesn't exactly love State College. Their oldest daughter lives in the Charlotte area now. Their youngest daughter is a senior in high school. So like they're at a point that way in life where it would be easy to kind of start over or take a year off and press refresh somewhere else. Because I still think James Franklin's a good football coach. I do. I just don't know at this point what's their left. It's almost like it's run its course. And another comparison I've made, and not to go on, but another comparison I've made is Andy Reid and the Eagles, right? There was a lot more good than bad, but everyone knew it was time to end. And Andy Reid's gone on to have a lot of success, obviously. The Eagles have gone on to have a lot of success still. I think it's similar to that, where it's, 12 years is a long time in modern college football for a coach to be somewhere. And eventually it runs its course. And I think we, unfortunately, especially because this is a year no one expected it to be this way, we might be getting to that point where, James Franklin and Penn State are running their course.
Yeah, so many failures, obviously, in a game such as this, talking about the UCLA game. To me, as someone, again, who's watched UCLA pretty closely out here in the West, like it's my job to follow UCLA as a rival of USC and as a, former Pac-12 school in the Big Ten. The thing that stood out about UCLA, just more than anything else, other than the dysfunction under Deshaun Foster, so that got flushed out, and that's obviously made UCLA noticeably better. But coaching aside, UCLA just looked like a very soft, very weak team, and that was especially the case on the offensive line. UCLA scored just 14 points against Northwestern in Tim Skipper's first game as interim head coach. Now, obviously, that the meager performance had a lot to do with Tino Sunseri being completely out to lunch, in over his head as a play caller, had no prior experience. Jerry Neuheisel, an obvious and substantial upgrade. But this has been the under-discussed element of this upset for me. Jerry Neuheisel's getting the praise, and he deserves it, right? He called a great game. But play calling is not supposed to matter if your offensive line is weak. UCLA's offensive line held up okay against Penn State's defensive front. To me, that is the ultimate shocker of the game. Your opinion on that, or the other really big shocker, just in terms of unit versus unit in Penn State versus UCLA?
No, I agree. I mean, I remember So that Friday night when they played New Mexico, I remember getting home from a varsity football game and watching some of that, and I'm like, my God, what is this? They're just getting run over at home by New Mexico. And you mentioned the offensive line play. You know, you hear it all the time in football, right? It doesn't matter if you have the X's and O's if you don't have the Jimmies and Joes. And Penn State's defensive line, which was supposed to be one of the best in the country this year, just got pushed around. And their offensive line, that in the preseason, James Franklin is toting this group saying he believes they're going to win the Joe Moore Award. They couldn't push you. They haven't pushed anybody, or they couldn't push Villanova around that well. It's alarming. And yeah, that's the part to me where I think it's so confounding. Is a big reason why there was so much expected of Penn State this year was you thought they would be a tremendous line of scrimmage team. And the defensive line has been really good up until Saturday. But the offensive line hasn't found it. And, you know, with the offensive line, it's hurt the running backs. Again, coaching there, Katron Allen is averaging like 7 yards a carry and getting like 8 carries a game. I don't know. No one has a reasonable explanation for that. James Franklin was asked about that at his press conference today and just gave a word salad of an answer. So yeah, that I agree with you. That was probably the most, if I'm Penn State, the most concerning part to me in that game was my expensive defensive line where we brought back Zane Durant and we brought back Denai Dennis Sutton, and you have what looks like a budding superstar in Chaz Coleman, who you fought off Ohio State for tooth and nail in his recruitment to keep him committed to Penn State. Those guys they were invisible for most of the game. And I think that's what's super concerning is if you can't against a team like UCLA, like you said, they look soft. I agree from what I saw. And not that I've watched a lot of UCLA this year, but again, I watched a lot of that New Mexico game that Friday night and just, my goodness, did they look horrific. And like you said, Matt, tip of the cap to Jerry Neuheisel. He called an awesome game. I will admit, even as a Penn State fan, I saw Rick Neuheisel came out and released a statement apologizing today. I get it, but as a dad, I thought it was so cool the way they would cut to him and his reaction. I love that. Like, that's one of the cool things about sports, you know, that the human element of it. But yeah, like you said, if you don't have the players, it shouldn't matter who's calling your offense, right? You could have prime Lincoln Riley or Andy Reid or Urban Meyer, whoever calling. If you don't have the players, it shouldn't matter, and it shouldn't have mattered for UCLA. And yeah, they came out and pushed Penn State around. What was they ran for 315 yards, something like that, when they'd been averaging like 40 yards rushing a game or something ridiculous. Just, and to me, that's where it screamed quit factor to me, where it's just, where was the effort? Like I said, I saw 2 guys play with any effort at all on the defense on Saturday. And I tip my cap to Maury Campbell and Dom DeLuca because they played their hearts out, but I saw almost zero effort from anyone else on that defense.
Yeah, this is where, again, as we pepper you with questions, Marty, I just expect like you throw your hands up and you can give us answers. But when you take, you know, let's still understand that UCLA has a roster that's probably, if you combine all the recruiting classes, like a top 25 roster in the sport. For as bad as they've played, their recruiting classes are usually 18 to 25 in the country, something in that range. But yeah, where you take a team that's substantially better, but football's an effort sport. If you're not trying, then, you know, those are scholarship athletes over there. They're fast, and they reached the Big Ten level as well to a certain degree. So it's an effort sport. You bring up the New Mexico game, and it brought to mind, and again, this might be one for Matt and I to put our brains together along with the chat and put together when is the last time a team was a 15-point favorite in a game, as UCLA was against New Mexico, lost by 25, and then later in the season, 25 roughly point underdog and beats a team of this significant? Like, it's just a crazy, crazy situation.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's again, you have to do research on it, but I would feel safe making a bet that that's probably never happened. Right. I mean, because usually if you suffer a loss like that, you're the team that's checked out on the year, especially when you're on an assistant head coach and your coordinators are fired and you've got grad assistants, you know, calling plays, and just it's mind boggling. Like, the more you talk about it, the more unbelievable it truly becomes, that just how on earth did this happen? And again, I think in the second half, like UCLA's next to last drive, where all they did was get a first down, and the game would have been over. You have a wide open receiver fall down, literally short of the first down marker on third down. On fourth down, the one time all game, Penn State stuffs the quarterback run, and you're like, they're going to sneak out of here somehow. They don't deserve this win, but they're going to find a way to get it. And it was just, no matter how badly UCLA tried to give it away, Penn State wouldn't let them give it away. And it's just, it's an effort thing. Like you said, Mark, obviously the kids, if you're at UCLA, you don't lack talent, you don't lack physical tools, right? Yeah, you might not be a top 5, top 10 roster like Penn State's was anticipated to be, but you should still be a solid top 25 to 30 power rated team, if nothing else. So like, it's not like there isn't talent there, especially when you have a quarterback like Nico Imalieva, who was a 5-star guy for a reason and has shown flashes of it in his career and played a heck of a game on Saturday. Yeah. So when you combine that with just the lack of effort I saw from Penn State's defense, and this is what happens, I guess. It's just, I still can't totally wrap my head around it. I've never seen anything like that in all my years of watching football. Because, I mean, even like you said, the App State Michigan thing, that Michigan team, which it's kind of fitting because there's definitely some similarities there, because that was the year Henny and Hart and Manningham and Jake Long all forego the NFL to come back to make one last run at it. But yeah, it's just, it's mind-boggling what happened. And again, like I said, the program as a whole moving forward now, there are a lot of questions that need answered. There's a lot of self-reflection that needs to be done by a lot of people. And like I said earlier in the show, I'm not going to be the least bit surprised if, we're coming together for a show sometime in December to discuss a new coach at Penn State. Cause that's the kind of loss that I don't know how you come back from it. I think, I said it to some people after the game and said, I don't know when James Franklin is done at Penn State, but I think you can look back at Saturday, October the 4th, 2025 and circle that as the day it ended for him at Penn State.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. Well, Marty, this would typically be the point at which, before we let you go, we would ask you to slice up the Northwestern film and tell us what their path to victory was. But if one team doesn't try, then I guess the path to victory could be anything. So we won't let you do that, because we do have our Clemson guy waiting to tell us why Clemson's so bad and why they're so disappointing. So we appreciate you being here, and just let everyone know where they can find your podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. We are the Whiteout Report podcast. You can follow us on Twitter. That's our Twitter handle. Find us on YouTube. We come to you guys Wednesday evenings, usually around 9 or 9:30, to preview the upcoming game. And then Saturdays, 20 to 30 minutes after the game ends, we'll get on and we'll discuss. So yeah, come check us out. Dylan Callahan, Crawley, and myself, Dylan and I, if that's the name that sounds familiar to Penn State fans, former beat writer for the Nittany Lions over at Happy Valley Insiders, the Rivals Network, before we were bought up by On3 and put out of business. Dylan and I also wrote together Black Sheep Diaries for a long time. So yeah, come check it out. It's fun at this point too, with he and I on there, where we're not, officially affiliated with Rivals or anything of the sort anymore. So we can kind of wear the fan hood on your sleeve a little bit more.